Hi, Michael.
Hello, Dydine and Alex.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
I am well. I'm well. And you all?
We're doing great. We want to thank you first for coming on our podcast and sharing your wisdom, your story, your purpose in life with us.
Mhm.
I know that a lot of our audiences would definitely love and enjoy our conversation. So, welcome and thank you.
Thank you all for inviting me and having me on your podcast. I will let you know not only is it a distinct honor of mine to be here today, but this is the first podcast I've ever been on.
Oh man,
Isn't it
see,
right? I'm so
it's an
happy
honor.
because you're never gonna forget this one.
Yeah, right.
That's right. That's right.
Gonna get lost into other podcasts if you're gonna do.
Yeah,
So we're always gonna be on, in the back of your mind. That
yes,
That's right. The ice was broken here.
yes.
exactly. All right. So,
Yeah.
are you ready? Are you ready for the question?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
Okay. All right. So can you take us back when you were born, like the whole growing up thing? What was it like growing up? Actually, just take us through your origin story.
Okay. So, wow, I'll have to go back to 1973 because that was a magical year that I came into existence in this world.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a native of Killeen, Texas. That's where I was born at. What's unique about that is that I'm a military brat, as we say. Kids of service members that have served. So military brat, and because of that, you can imagine I've moved around a lot in my life as a child.
Yeah.
But that for me was pleasurable to be a military brat, a child that lived a nomadic lifestyle per se, because you knew you were going to move every 2 to 4 years, right?
Mm.
And that for me, it was I looked upon it as a blessing because it truly allowed me to be comfortable engaging people because I knew from the day that I arrived at our next location that we
Yeah.
lived at, our next duty assignment for my father, that I needed to day one go out in the neighborhood and start meeting other kids because, you know, before you know it, it was time that you were going to leave again. And, back then, unless you were a pen pal, you didn't stay in contact with your friends because the internet didn't exist, right?
Right.
And if you didn't write letters to your
Yeah.
friends, you may not have ever seen them again. You know,
Mm.
email wasn't a thing for me. So it was truly putting pen to paper, pencil to paper, if you were going to remain in contact with someone. So, and at the time, I was a novice writer, so I knew it behooved me to get on the street quickly and start meeting other
You
children in the neighborhood and in schools
Yeah.
to befriend them because it was only a short matter of time before you were going to be moving to the next location.
That's interesting. I've known my share of military brats as well, and I've always gotten the impression that it's tough. It's tough to kind of bounce around to new areas, and there's always the thing where people don't want to make friends because they know they're going to move within a couple of years. So they just decide it's easier for me emotionally, to just keep on going as life takes us. But hearing you that you had that conviction to be like, this is good for me, to go out and interact with people and keep up my people skills or just to make these connections. That's really interesting that you had that perspective at such a young age.
And I don't know when it really kicked off. I do remember um, between 7 and 10 years of age, I lived in Europe. We were stationed in Germany, and we lived on a small. Um, it wasn't even a military installation. It was a small concern, as we called it back then, and it was a neighborhood that predominantly was comprised of military families, and we were co-located next to a small German village. And I remember, my oldest sibling, my brother, was going to the high school at the time. I was in elementary, and my sister was in middle school. And there were days at the end of school we would cut through a little fence line and go into the German village, and we would go to the local, candy store and get German candy. Um, and so I reflect on those days, knowing that having that experience and leaving the U.S. at an early time in my life, it just opened my life aperture to want to explore more about people, about dialects and ethnicities and diversity, and just be a world traveler. And to this day, I attempt to, and this started in 2007. I leave the U.S. no less than once a year to travel somewhere in the world to see and meet people.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
I like that.
Yeah, that's our goal with Alex. Once the pandemic goes down, we're gonna try to travel as much as we can to see the
Yeah,
world. And
highly advise it. And it's, tomorrow's not promised, right? So
tomorrow is not.
it's and it's amazing when you are able to um, leave your current humble abode and go out and see and meet and greet people from around the world. It truly, I think, broadens us as people, as individuals, as couples, etc. It just broadens us. And you know, prior to the advent of the internet, I had the 1978 Britannica Encyclopedia, and so that was my internet. I would read those, from A to Z to really learn about the world and about things within the world. So today's society, I think, is very fortunate if they have access to the internet to be able to use that digital encyclopedia to learn. But to me, it's still nothing better than to physically travel and see people and just see how they live their lives abroad. I think it's an amazing experience to have.
Yeah.
I feel like I grew up like you did in the way. I mean, both my parents were in the military, but most of the moving were not really because it was stationed somewhere. Just we had, struggles at home, and we have to move different districts in my country. And I find myself even now having, like, knowing people from all over my country, and even if we meet in a different country now, I still know where they come from. It's easy for me to connect with the people I didn't even grow up with, but because I was able to move to those places and live there, I have an experience. And I used to think about it as, it was hard to say goodbye to my friends and make it hard to make new friends. And I was an introverted kid. So it was not, fun, but I feel like it trained me it did train me now when I moved to America by myself. I was terrified, but it was easy for me to make new friends for some.
That's right.
I was, trained already.
Yeah.
So
I
did something good.
That's right. Yeah. And it's, I don't know about you all, but one of my main, I think, inlets when I meet people is I try to find a commonality right away, because if you can find a commonality right away, it eases the conversation from there.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what was the life your father led, how you saw him work, or the countries you moved to, the experiences of your father? Was that what led you to go into law enforcement?
So yes and no. So I will tell you, prior to, so he used to take me to some of his, of course, work locations, but he'd also take me out in the field sometimes as a young child to see what, he did, to show me what he did with the troops. And of course, I was happy to be there and elated to see what my father did. But prior to that, even as a small kid, and this is what I think was unique for me, whenever I saw a fire truck drive by, or a EMS vehicle go by, or a police vehicle go by, I there was something internal to me that got excited about seeing them being out in the community and providing services to the community, giving back and being a public servant. And so that was internal to me even as a young kid. And I'm talking 3, 4, 5 years of age, I would get
Wow.
excited, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it wasn't just the sirens and the lights that excited me, but it was about seeing them in action and seeing them once again helping others.
Mhm.
And for me, what was unique about that is um, I end up joining the military, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Because of seeing what my father did and being around the military. But
Right.
I also was police, I was federal law enforcement within the military. So I end
Mhm.
up doing two of those things that I grew up around and was excited about,
Yeah.
2 in 1. And so, and for me, it was a sense of, once again, not just here locally, but whenever I was abroad, internationally, being able to give back and provide community service wherever I was. So that to me started way young, but
Yeah.
also was reinforced by seeing what my father did as a serviceman.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think I've ever heard of being a police officer within the U.S. Army. So how is that any different than the usual
Um,
kind of route
Although,
to policing? I mean, how does that work exactly?
So it's it's definitely a different route because you are working on behalf of whatever department you're aligned with, i.e. I was with the Department of the Army, so fell under the Department of Defense, but within the Department of the Army. And you provide police law enforcement actions for the installation that you reside on, right, or that you're
Mm,
assigned to.
okay.
So that's, you're actually doing whatever I would equate it to local law enforcement or state level law enforcement, but you're on the military installation. So you actually have um, law enforcement capacity
Yeah.
and enforcement capability within the federal installation. You see, so
Mm,
now that what's unique about that is that once you drive off the installation, right,
mhm.
because of posse comitatus, that ends unless you're at a
totally.
higher level within federal law enforcement, you're supporting other federal agencies. So,
Right.
for both continental United States, but also internationally, you're able
Yeah.
to provide that law enforcement support for military installations and um, their populations that are being served. And it's no different. That I think
Um,
what people don't realize is that most installations are a microcosm of
yeah.
society, where you have police that are within the
Mhm.
military, you have
Yeah.
firefighters that work on the installation,
Yeah.
doctors, nurses, etc. So it's basically a microcosm of
Yeah.
civil society, but um, it's on a installation. Yeah.
Mm,
Now I'm
mm.
thinking because obviously you're a Black family and you were stationed in European countries. How was that experience for you? Did you, because I know I have a lot of my friends who live in Europe, and sometimes when they visit in the States, they say racism here is less than racism in Europe.
Mm.
Mhm.
Or
So
they start comparing and
right, right. So I will tell you. So I was there in the early '80s, and um, of course, I was a kid, and I
yes,
wasn't out in the
in Europe.
community as much. But I don't remember having any concerns or
Yeah,
issues based on
on the
the
rest.
color of my skin.
Yeah.
And I do remember, this is a story that will never leave me. We had just arrived in Germany, and I remember the only hotel available was this very expensive hotel. It was a high-rise hotel, and I think we were in Frankfurt at the time.
Mm.
Mm.
And I remember my father coming to us um, and saying, I need to leave to go find another place for us to stay, because after tonight I can't afford to keep us here.
Mm.
And so he went out and found. So in Germany in particular, they have these. They're not hostels, but they're like family hotels, and they're called guest houses or gas house.
Yeah.
And he found one, and I remember the next morning we checked out of this high-rise hotel, and we went to this guest house, and we were there for about a week. And what was unique, and I'll once again never forget this, the owners of the guest house, this family that owned the guest house, they were
Mm.
there every day They were the ones preparing the meals. They were the ones cleaning the tables, and their children were there, right? And they had a small daughter. She was probably a year younger than me. And every day, we would come down to eat. We ate together at the same big table, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so this to me was well before bed and breakfasts were a thing. This is just how they were as a people. And
Yeah.
no matter who you were, when you stayed there, you felt as if you were part of their family,
Oh,
you know? And so I
yeah.
never forgot that, because other than a bed and breakfast here, where can you go here to find something like that?
Not even hotels will treat you
Yeah.
You know?
even
So
the
I
way.
will never forget that. And like I said, I was about 7 years old.
7 years. Wow, that's.
Yes.
We were having a conversation probably a week ago or so
Yeah.
about people quartering people, like travelers, like
Mhm.
driving through a town,
Yeah.
and you need some place to stay. There were no hotels around, and you would just find someone who would take you in for the night, and then you'd be on your way. We were having the conversation, and I think you may have asked me, Dydine, if I've ever experienced that, or if here in America you've seen it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't give an answer. I don't think that it happens so often.
It's because in back home, I think we're talking about my mom's sister.
Mhm.
She lived by a main road, and whenever people I feel like they were like nomads, traveling. They're probably going to a city next to my aunt's city, and they will stop by and just knock at the door, and tell whoever's at home that they're traveling. It's far. It's evening. They can't get there. They need shelter, and and people would just shelter them. And for some reason, culturally, everyone has that extra room, extra sheets, extra everything for that random guest to show up whenever they need that. So and those people, sometimes they stayed for like a month or two.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And find work until they have more enough
money
they
to
can continue their journey, and you will never see them again.
Mhm.
But they become family when they were there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I just think it's so fascinating, and maybe that was a different time, maybe not. I'm sure there's
It's in
still
the
loads of
80s
places that
and
people still operate like that, with that sort of trust in that community. But it's just so fascinating that you experienced that at 7 years old.
Yeah.
You got to experience not only living in a different culture, very different from your own, and I'm sure a lot of ways. But you got to see that sense of community and that lovingness. That's something that I wish more people could experience on a more regular basis.
Absolutely.
Instead of being afraid or not trusting, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. But see, that ties back to think if we were not here in the US and we were anywhere else, if you didn't come to the US, you may never experience what we're experiencing now, right? And how we live, and how we go to work every day, and commute, and those kind of things. And that's why I think it's important for as many people as possible to do study abroad, or whatever you can use as a tool, or a glide path, or a bridging apparatus to go internationally and see other things and other places. It's just going to, once again, broaden you so much. Yeah, truly.
Absolutely. Now, as we're speaking about this, I'm wondering if all those experiences also kind of helped you look at humanity in a different lens. Sometimes when you grew up in one area, that's your life, that's your world. So anything outside of that world, when it comes, it's new, and sometimes we don't receive change. Sometimes change is scary, and sometimes it makes it, and fear can create a lot of dangerous thoughts and things like that. Was it something that seeing people from all over the world that helps you look at life or humanity in a different way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And once again, from childhood to also being in the military, and then since then, just traveling the world,
Mm,
and seeing and getting away. The other part of that is not just being a tourist and staying in the tourist locations, truly getting out off
mm,
the grid and seeing how people live their
mm.
regular lives, outside of these resorts. Uh, Once again, that um, truly has, I think, helped me see um, man and womankind. I don't like just using that
Yeah,
mankind thing.
that's true. Men
Um,
and
you know,
kind. Like,
um, Seeing people for who they are,
mm,
and humanity. Um, Notice manatee in there again. So
Right.
people for who they are. Just yeah, embracing that and knowing that we're all different, but we're all the same.
Yep.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep. That's what we
Yeah.
try to preach on this podcast as well. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's about culture. This whole podcast we talk about is generally just talking about
Mm.
different people's experiences from all
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
world. Um, and within the U.S., everybody has their own experiences,
Mhm.
and it's refreshing hearing you talk about, and not even specifically, but the way you talk. There is a
Mm.
rhythm to it.
Mm.
It looks like and feels like you've lived life in a way that has been very soul nourishing for you,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
it is refreshing to see your perspective is broadened. And like you just said, for people who travel,
Yeah.
maybe that's a byproduct of traveling for you, is you definitely have a handle on life, it seems.
It is definitely a byproduct, I think, right? But more so, it's the experiences I've had with people on those journeys
Yes.
that
Mm.
has made me who I am today, right?
Mm.
Because had I not had those touch points in life along the way,
Mm.
um, yeah, I couldn't have developed this just by, individually making these trips to
Yeah.
different places in the world and not retaining those touch points each
Mm.
time.
Yeah.
Mm.
Right.
Mm. Oh. Um, now, because you are in law enforcement, and law enforcement lately, especially here, isn't that popular. And we've had a lot of I would say chaos in the last few years. It has happened before, but during the COVID, there was a lot of, I would say, turmoil.
Mhm.
um, for you as someone who has experienced humanity from different parts of the world and seeing what's happening, the divides in this country, what would be your message, or how does that make you feel?
So two questions there.
I
The
know.
message, right? My message, but how it makes me feel.
Yeah.
I'll go with the feeling portion
Mm.
first.
Yeah.
Um, Having served for this country 20 plus
Mhm.
years in uniform,
Mm.
and having put my life, uh, in harm's way for men and women to my left and right that were in uniform with me, and those that were not. I mean, I worked with the Red Cross and other, NGOs when I was deployed as well. Um, the feeling is it it hurts internal
Mm.
because I know that we can and should be better than we are right now.
Mm.
Um, and my message would be it directly correlates and ties back to what I said before, that we are all different, but
Mm.
we are all the same.
Absolutely.
And if we, not him or her or
Mm.
they, but we
Mm.
can truly see each other for being people,
Mm.
right? For
Mm.
not being um, a certain affiliation with a political party or a certain lifestyle or whatever. If we can just see each other for being the people that we are, for being the humans that we are, and love one another, right? I think we'll all be better off for it. And love thy neighbor,
Mm.
you know, that's what it's about. Because if we can love,
Mm.
that will vanquish and override everything else, I believe.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. One of the things you said, you mentioned that often at times we don't think about is that we are humans, we are people, and if we get the chance to know each other, we are actually more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
If someone saw you in the uniform, they will know that you're a father and you're a grandfather, and they will connect to that if they took that moment to actually know who you are. It's so that's, as you were talking, that's the first thing that came to my mind,
Yeah.
that we are, when we look at each other, we may think different stories, but when we get to know each other, we realize how much alike we are.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
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 We are all someone's daughter or
Yeah.
son, right?
Mhm.
We are all someone's brother or sister,
Yes,
life mate, whatever. But yeah, we all have that. That's that commonality again,
it is. It
right?
is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
instead of us looking at each other and looking at our differences, I think
Mhm.
if we look at our commonalities and we draw upon that to
Yeah.
further to get to know one another,
Yes.
right? The
Yeah.
barriers come down,
Yeah.
and that's where, once again, I can care for you because
Yeah.
I know more about you, and
Mhm.
I can see you for who you are because I know more about you, right?
Yes.
I often say that in the absence of reality, one's
Mhm.
perception becomes reality. So
Mhm.
we have to break down those perception barriers, and you do that by, once again, learning about other people,
Yeah.
um, and finding the commonalities. And no matter what, we all have something in common,
We
no
do.
matter what.
Very
We
true.
do. We do. Yeah.
I'm curious,
Yeah.
and I'm going to try to formulate my question as I
You think
ask it.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So earlier you brought up the idea of
Mm.
public servant,
Mm.
serving the public, and you got excited as a 3, 4, 5-year-old seeing people go and try to help people, not so much the
Yeah.
action of it, or the badge or the gun or the other things that you see on face value, but the actual act of helping and serving communities.
Mm.
We interviewed my dad in the second episode of this podcast. He was a former police officer, Dallas PD, and he had also described himself as a public servant versus a law enforcement.
Mm.
And I'm getting the same vibe from you in that you, deep in your heart, you just want to help people, and you want to see people grow, and you want to see the communities that you serve grow, and also learn how to give themselves to other people. And that breeds that progressiveness, that breeds kindness and positivity and all that. And so in your years of serving in the army and in law enforcement, the idea of public service, have you seen that idea sort of grow in your time of service? Because I know, I mean, most cops are like you. Most cops want to see people do well, want to see the community do well. And you hear about the bad apples. We won't get into all that, but there is more mindful policing.
Yeah.
And I want to coin, there's a guy, Lloyd, who works for the museum. He also, I think he has a podcast called Mindful Policing. I didn't just make that up. That's his
Right,
thing, Mindful
right.
Policing. But anyway, but it's true though, right? I mean, have you seen more of a growth and more conversation around that mindful policing over the time that you've been involved?
I have, but I want to draw back to what you said about the sense of what's internal to us, what's innate to us, and why we do what we do, right? So to me, it goes back to, and I'm not going to lump these professions, these careers, these job types together, but when you think about law enforcement, when you think about EMS, when you think about firefighters, teachers, right? Folks that are collecting waste management, right? Those janitors, those types of professions, careers, job types. To me, you choose to do that because number one, you want to do it, but you have to ask yourself, why do you want to do it? And for me, it was once again that sense of wanting to help others, but it was a passion that I had to want to help others.
Yeah.
And this is why, you mentioned the two words bad apple or apples, right? But when you look at it, and in this size, it's not just law enforcement centric, right? You have bad teachers, you have bad lawyers, you have bad doctors. And the last thing I want to do is to be in a court of law and have a bad lawyer representing me. The last thing I want to do is be under the surgical blade and have a bad doctor working on me, right?
No.
So we have to understand, once again, like I said, military installation is a microcosm of society, right? And the same way you look at that, we also have to look at law enforcement, medical services, anything, right? That you're going to have bad actors in the, throughout life, throughout society. And but you have to also know that, look upon the better angels, knowing that I believe in my heart that a majority of people in any profession, they are there because of the drive and passion they have to be there in the first place. They wake up every day saying, I'm going to go to work to be a better person, but also to be better at what my skill craft is.
Yeah.
And that's what I look at. And knowing that not everybody's perfect. So we're going to have bad apples in anything you look at, right? But I'm an optimistic person. I've always been that way. And, just as you mentioned, we have some rough times right now, but I envision that, we're going to be better than we are today, tomorrow.
Yes.
And a lot of that ties into you all, right? The future of this nation and of the world. And when I look at, the youth of today and the capability and the things you are doing, i.e. this podcast as an example, you wouldn't have found many folks your age back during my time that would have had the ingenuity, that would have had the passion, the drive, the motivation, and determination to do what you're doing right now, to be a platform to make us a better people. So that's what gives me hope, confidence, and once again, that internal feeling that we're going to be better, right? And history shows that we have gotten better, but we have a lot of work to do, but we've gotten better from where we were 100 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then it kind of plays into the whole notion that, do what you can, use your abilities that you've been given to leave this place a better place, than when you found it.
That's right. And so Dydine, you had mentioned it. I'm a father and I'm a grandfather, right? Kalani just turned 1 yesterday. Right?
My, so
right?
beautiful.
And we talked about this briefly, but not until she was born a year and a day ago, and I held her in my arms, I thought about my sons, but I wasn't thinking about generational wealth and the legacy I was going to leave behind to the level until she came into this world. I was able to now look past my 2 sons' life aperture to say, what am I going to do now for my grandchild? And so it's amazing how that has changed me in a way where, I'm putting measures in place right now that will not reap the planting of the seed until I've left this earth. And I'm okay with that because I know what I'm doing now isn't for me. And some of it's not even for my sons, but it's for my grandchildren.
Yeah.
So that's where that legacy comes in. That's where that generational wealth comes in. And wealth is not just, of course, tied to the financial. It is, to me, it's tied to sharing. I'll give you an example. So for Thanksgiving, I had the pleasure to, it was the first time in a long time that my entire family was together. We went to my sister's in Florida, and it was the first time that my father met his great grandchild. He met Kai for the first time, right?
That's amazing.
And it truly was. The generational wealth piece to this was that we took time out, and I told my father, I prepped him before this happened. I said, Dad, I said, if you're okay with it, what I would like to do is to record you talking about your father, your grandfather, your great grandfather, because there's stories that I'm sure I have never heard as your son, and I guarantee your grandchildren haven't heard. And we get to record it so Kai can see it when you've left this earth, right? He's 75 years old, you see. So, and we it was about an hour and 18 minutes that we just listened to him for an hour and 18 minutes, talk about his life, our family, generational deep. And that is so, rich, not in finances, but in that family generational wealth that you can't replace stuff like that.
No, you cannot. You cannot replace something like that. You say that. I remember we interviewed someone. What was it? She's from Armenia. She's very young, and she was talking about how
I just watched some of that, by the way.
You did?
Yeah. So just to confirm, it was in 2019. She went to your website, had you come to her high school. You took
Yes.
many pictures with them. So yes, I just watched some of that. Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. Okay. She's a generation after the Armenian genocide. And one of the things she mentioned was that even though in her ancestry, there's a lot of pain, but there's also strength that came from it. And that's why she carries with her. And as you were talking about your dad, doing the interviews with you and sharing his story, just for your grandchild to hear the strength that got your father where he is and who you are, and who your sons are and who she's going to become, that's the gift. That's the generational wealth, because she can connect the dots. They always say that when we know where we come from, then we can know where we're going. And I feel like it's very special, especially when you don't know what your grandparents went through, and you don't know anything. Sometimes we're talking about intergenerational trauma. Sometimes things happen to you and you don't know why, and just messes up with your mind. But if you know where it's coming from, you can be able to, sit with it. And so it's it's beautiful that you did that.
Yeah, that's
very special. She's very lucky to have you as a grandpa.
Well, I'm blessed to have her as my granddaughter.
Yes. That is, I'm still processing it. That's why I'm not really saying much, but
that's okay.
It's such a special thing to, and you hear, I think back to my family, and obviously my grandfather, great grandfather, I never knew my great grandfather, but they didn't have this technology. They didn't have phones and cameras and audio recording devices. Yeah. Everything that we knew about them was told either through the generations, by voice, or by stories. People recall the stories, or it was written down. And so it feels like this is like a new age sort of kind of passing of the torch, and you get to know your ancestors, very, very thoroughly, or much more thoroughly than they would have had the opportunity 40, 50 years ago. So it's incredibly exciting to hear that Kalani's going to be able to look back and listen to this hour and 18-minute conversation.
And watch. That's right.
And watch, see him.
You get to, it's so special. Even visually, you're able to see him and hear the energy that he speaks with and the excitement. And it's just like I knew him. Even if I was a baby, he was 75 years old, I knew who he was.
That's right.
And carry that with me.
He held me, right? I don't remember that to this day. I remember my father's mother, my grandmother, right? But my grandfather, I can't remember a time where I can remember holding his hand, walking with him on the farm, because I was so young. She will have that as a, a time capsule
Yeah,
that she can watch as many times and listen to as many times as she wants to.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
I love how you said it changed your life. And I remember when you asked me to sign my book to, you had a book with all the law enforcement people who were there. You were the actually you were the first grandpa I have signed a book for a grandchild who is 6 months old.
Yeah. But see that, Alex and Dydine, that ties into, I had already had that mind shift that the book was given to me, but it
Yeah.
wasn't for me. It was for
Oh,
her.
I know,
You
I
see,
know.
that's that generational
Yeah, it
passing of
was so special.
experience. Yeah.
I felt it and I was signing it to her and I just could think of her when she's 12 years old and because that's when she's going to read it and just like, it was very special.
Yeah. Yeah.
And knowing that you had, like, even when she's older, knowing that she is this much loved, it's
Mhm.
no one in the world will make her forget how much loved she is because
Right.
so yeah.
Yeah.
And think about it, a child that was only 6 months old
Yeah.
was able to definitely affect my life, her parents' life,
Mhm.
but she's already affected you all.
My life, I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we were saying that you're never gonna forget us because with the first interview, never going to forget that moment
No.
Mhm.
signing her book for her uh,
And her eating the book, right?
and her eating the book.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will tell you, it's still fully intact. It's in
I
her
know.
library, and it's waiting on her to be able to
I
one day
can't
read those pages.
wait. I can't wait to stay in touch and once she's 12 years old to hear from her and
That's right.
so it's yeah,
Yeah.
very special.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to meet her in person,
I
right?
will.
After she's able to read the book, and you have a photo taken of her with your book at 6 months old, and then with you at 12.
I
You
know.
know?
I know that
Wow.
was, oh
That's
my
like, it's
God.
blowing my
See,
mind right now.
yes, that's something that gives, I feel like as humans, those emotions, those things to look up to, they're the ones that gives us hope to stay alive, even when there are hardships. Creating those moments, I feel like it keeps you moving. And now, yeah, so it's amazing that you're creating these memories before even they happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I always say our children, they're our future, right? They're the
Mhm.
future of this world, and this ties back to why I believe um, teachers are so incredibly important in our lives,
Mm.
right? Um, so I had not gone back to my high school for 17 years. I had missed my 10-year high school reunion because I was deployed to
Mm.
Iraq. I had come back. I was still serving in the military, and um, I went back for my 20-year high school reunion, right? But I
Mm.
had not physically been within the walls of my high school for 17 years.
Yeah.
And I
Mhm.
walked in the front door, and the late Sergeant First Class James Bobbitt was in the front office. And I walked in, and I expected him to remember me because for 4 years he was my junior RTC cadre instructor, right? So I knew he
Yeah.
would remember me for who I was. Um, but it was great seeing him. And I said, Sarge, can I walk the halls and just see who's still teaching here? He said, yeah, Mike, go ahead. So I walk the halls. I'm walking down this particular hall, and it's the social studies, area of the high school. And I walk by this class, and I see Miss Martin, right? So I walk in, and so she hadn't seen me in 17 years. And I
Wow.
walk in, and she stops teaching. She looks at me. She looks back at the class, the entire classroom, and she's getting a visual, not on the students physically seated, but on the chairs. And I kid you not, she looked, she said, second row, third seat, Michael Thompson, how are you doing? And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
But
Teachers.
those are the teachers that they are select and few, but when those type of teachers enter your life,
Yeah.
they help develop you, they help change you, they help mold you and put you on that glide path to
Yeah.
become who you are, right? Who you are today. And Miss Mitchell, Miss Martin, I can name them and how they influenced me. My seventh grade English teacher in Kansas, who one day he came in the first day of class and said, this is the current syllabus and curriculum. We're not doing that. He issued a new one that day. And I don't know how he got it approved, but it was the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit. And all of our tests and everything came from Old English lore from
Yeah.
J.R.R. Tolkien books. And that put me on a glide path to want to read. I didn't like reading before then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And after that, so seventh grade, that put me on that glide path of reading and the joy of the written word. By eighth grade, we had moved from Kansas to Louisiana, to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. In eighth grade, I volunteered as a elective to be a librarian assistant, so I could be the first one in the library and choose any book I wanted. Had it not been for that seventh grade teacher,
Yeah.
right? That wouldn't have put me on this glide path to enjoy reading. And of course, the more we read, what happens? The more articulate we become, both in the spoken and the written word. And so that one teacher put me on that glide path to be the orator that I am today.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
It is.
Let me say, I would have aced that class, that Lord of the Rings class. Man, you throw some Lord of the Rings in me, that would have been amazing.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's empowering though. Because I had a similar story in the seventh grade. I had a teacher named Mr. Hooten. He was a young guy, probably like mid-20s. I mean, at that point, anybody over 17 was old to me. So I'm like, okay, this guy. But he encouraged the students, these 13-year-old kids, to learn. And he would force us to read. You have like 30, 40-minute reading segments. And he gave me a book because he knew I was interested in Greek mythology. This book called the Percy Jackson series.
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. So he gave me the Lightning Thief, the first book in the series. And something like a light switch flipped. I fell in love with reading from that day on. I think I finished that book within like 4 days or so after he gave it to me. But it was that sort of empowerment. He encouraged us. And he's like, Alex, you need to read this book. And I think you'd enjoy it. And that set me on this path to just love reading myself. So I can understand what you're talking about.
Indeed. And when you think about it, so what I love about reading, of course, it does so many things as it relates to the written and the verbal words that we put out, but also, at least the books I was reading back then, it would allow you to leave your current location and travel.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it takes you out of your current environment and lets your mind flow and go to wherever that location is within the book. And that's another thing I love about reading.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
I love writing more.
But
enjoying this.
Yeah, well, Dydine, guess what though? It's because of folks like yourself that gives Alex and us the joy of reading the written word.
Exactly.
Without you, we wouldn't be where we are, right?
He reads for fun. For me, I read if I something I want to learn something new, but reading for fun, it's rarely for me that I would. But I like. I like reading, but not as much as he would take a fiction book and just get into it.
Get into it. But think about it. You need both type of scholars. You have to have, you can't read anything if it was never written, right? So the passion of writers gives us the capability to have the passion to read. So we thank you for what you do.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
All right.
So before we go, there's something I wanted to touch on before we close our conversation, because I feel like your take on it will be very important. Recently we've been talking a lot about mental health, and it's something that is most of the time accompanied with shame and stigma. But the reason why I'm bringing it up, it's because you grew up in military family and you went to Iraq. You've been in the law enforcement all these years. There must be something you're doing good to stay sane. There's something you must be. There's a secret recipe that you have to keep you, be you who you are and not,
lose yourself
or carry PTSD, or how how I'm wondering what's your take on it and how
Understood.
do you.
So for me, it's a trilogy: mind, body, and soul. Right? Keeping the mind, the intellect engaged from reading and writing and studying and staying through self-education or through external education, but keeping the mind engaged, right? So that's the mind part.
Yeah.
The body
Yeah.
is my physical regimen. And I'll give you an example. This morning at 4:15 a.m., I was up, right? I started my day by looking at the world news and doing individual investments. And then I did an hour and about a 15-minute workout that included cardio, strength training, cool down, stretching. And then I came back here and I meditated.
Oh, wow.
Right?
That's beautiful.
Now, there's a bridging system there, because the first part of the body was everything from, keeping the brain engaged, physical workout, and then we bridge the gap between body and soul with that meditation, right? So now I'm moving towards the soul with the meditation. And then the other part of that is the spirituality, and that's the soul piece as well. And when I say spirituality, it's not tied to a religion. It's tied to just your belief system and your core values.
Yeah.
So for me, it's the mind, body, and soul, keeping all that firing as best you can on all cylinders. And that keeps you, I think, level set.
That's beautiful.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah. How did you come up with that strategy? And when did you start meditating? Because we meditate as well, and I didn't find it out until recently.
Well, you found it out a lot sooner than I did. I can tell you that, because I'm older than you are. I think I was always latched in with the mind piece, and definitely because of, being an avid athlete in middle school and high school, and then in the military, the body piece. But it was that soul piece. And I grew up because of my parents in the church, but like I said, it became deeper than that, because I stopped physically going to a physical church, and that's when I started moving more towards the spirituality of just the inner growth and belief systems and who you are as a person, your core values, and what's important in life with you. And my top two core values, right, are love and happiness. So everything that I do tends to grow and generate towards those two core values. If it makes me happy and I love it, life is good.
Life is good.
Right on. I like that.
You want to ask one more question?
I have two more.
Two more?
Yeah.
Oh,
so first,
yes.
In all of your travels, what are your top 3 locations? Top 3, if anybody's like, I want to travel somewhere.
Recommendations.
Recommendations.
Your favorite location.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Top 3 locations. Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. Okay. All right.
That's good.
It is one of the most eco-diverse places in the world. The people are, at least I've only been there once, and I'm going back sometime this year, but I actually just went several months ago. But the landscape, Mother Nature shows her beauty in this country. If I'm telling you, it's just amazing, right?
Wow.
But the people, very warm, very nice. And then the food. Oh my.
Oh man.
Oh my.
Now you're,
Yes.
now you're
Yes.
talking.
And
Yeah.
their motto is Pura Vida,
Yeah.
and so yeah, Costa Rica for sure. Another
Yeah.
spot that I would recommend
Mm.
is Aruba.
Aruba.
I've
Okay.
heard.
Aruba. Okay, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell you why. You ready? I don't know if you're ready for this. So
Music.
I know, drum roll, please. So
Mhm.
Aruba because um, former Dutch colony, right?
Mm, yeah.
Um, because of that, the local Arubian
Yeah.
speaks between 3 to 5 languages,
Oh
from
wow.
Dutch to
Wow.
English to
Right.
Spanish to Portuguese and French. And the
Wow.
local spoken languages, if I pronounce it correctly, is Papiamento, but it's a mixture of those
All of
languages,
languages.
Wow.
right?
Okay. Very
So
beautiful.
it is a melting pot,
Yeah.
Yes.
right? Another beautiful thing about it is that the island falls outside of the natural development of hurricanes every
Yeah.
year. So you can travel there or be there year round and not worry about hurricane systems
Oh
I
like the
know.
God.
rest of the Caribbean,
Yeah.
Right.
right?
Yeah. Mhm.
It borders along with Curaçao, another Dutch former colony,
Yeah.
Mhm.
island that is. And the other thing is that it is a arid and not humid island as relates to
Oh.
the daily
Mm.
Huh.
climb.
Yes.
Okay.
85 degrees, always a constant breeze. The waters are amazing and beautiful.
Oh,
And
Taking notes
oh
here.
wow.
yeah,
Yes.
I'm telling you. So one day you can have Caribbean cuisine, but because of the Dutch influence, the next day you could have, schnitzel and pommes frites,
Oh,
i.e., French fries.
I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah,
French fries.
yeah, yeah.
All right, let's do
So
it.
that's number two, and then
Okay.
Yes.
number three for me, uh, it would be Germany. And I
Um,
would say Europe, but Europe, I mean, that's
it,
just too
yeah.
large, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but just for me, it was Germany because I lived there for 3 years as a kid,
Mhm.
and I traveled there several times while I was in the service, for temporary duty. But then I
Yeah.
went back in 2019 just to see where I grew up, to eat the food and be around the people again. And
Mm.
and so, um, but I would say Costa Rica, Aruba, and then pretty much Europe, anywhere in
Oh,
Europe, just because
countries.
it's an amazing place to be and
Yeah.
to just see how people live their lifestyle there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a nice selection.
Yeah. I like it.
I've never been to
Yes.
either one or all any of
No.
them.
No.
I've
Yeah.
been to Ireland. I mean, I guess that's
That's
Europe, but
Europe.
It falls into it. Yeah,
been
yeah.
to the
Yeah.
Dominican
Kind of.
Republic, which is, but it's not Costa Rica, or it's
Right,
not
right.
Going to
Germany. So I gotta
Aruba,
go.
Costa Rica. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you
Yeah.
see, so you have Central America, you got the Caribbean, and then you have Europe. So
Europe. Yes.
you stay in that area, you'll be just
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Great. All
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely. And what was the last one? The other one. You had two
Yeah.
questions.
Well, it was the last question.
Well, that was the last question.
Well, yeah. So,
Oh, okay.
do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Are you gonna ask?
Yeah. I'll ask you. Okay. So, what is your lasting message? If you have a message to give to the world or our listeners, a community of people who just want to do good and want to see the world, in a more positive state, and then how they can give themselves to the growth of the world and our people.
Yeah.
What would your message or piece of advice be to those people?
So my piece of advice would be, and this has been, I think, a signature note throughout this entire conversation, is to see others as you see yourself, which is a human being. So that would be my message. And the life message or legacy, I would call it emblem, that I will leave within this podcast is that we, I think, have to remain optimistic on what our future holds as a world, not as a country, not as a nation, not as a city or town, but as a world, and believe that, we're going to be better off tomorrow than we were today or yesterday. And by embracing one another, by
Yeah.
loving each other, and giving more than receiving, we'll be better off in this world.
So we will take it to heart as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Thank you.
and
so much.
it's so beautiful and so simple, simple of a thing. I think we all know these things, but for whatever reason, we get caught up in our lives and the more individualistic aspects of it. But it is so much more freeing. Like you said, I love to what you just said, giving more than receiving. That's I mean, that's the simplest way I feel like you can just better everybody's life, including your own. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you again for joining us for this wonderful conversation.
I know.
This has been one of the,
I think one of my favorites.
yeah, I gotta say, yeah,
Yes.
definitely. I just, you shared.
I feel like I sounded smart too. I don't know, for some reason.
You always sound smart, Dydine. Come on now.
Yeah, you always sound smart. But no, but thank you for opening up your heart and sharing that with us, and of course your mind, your brilliant mind, and imparting your wisdom to us and our listeners. So thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to come onto your podcast, and like I said before, to me it's amazing to see you all as a young couple doing what you're doing now. And this is part of giving more than receiving, because of the hearts and minds you're able to reach through this podcast to better the world. I thank you for that.
Oh,
we do our best. We do our duty.
We try. Yeah. We're so honored to have you, and even to hear you say that, it means a lot.
Yes, it does.
It gives us more courage to keep doing what we're doing. So thank you.
Well, you got a supporter in me. You all are doing a great job, and like I said, I've already seen some of your podcasts, and
you have
continue the great work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.